Why are people so scared of terminals? For many years, a big dark square, which arguably isn't even dark anymore, has been terrorizing people by simply existing. But this dark square isn't out to get you, it isn't your enemy, it's a tool, and one that is always at your service. What's interesting is that before graphical interfaces, or GUIs, became commonplace, the primary way people communicated with their computers was through a command line, also known as a terminal, the very thing being feared by 90% of computer users. In fact, for much of computing history, there was no other option. Although graphical interfaces began appearing in the 1970s and eventually reached consumers in the 1980s, it wasn't until the mid-1990s, with the widespread adoption of Windows 95, that point-and-click interfaces truly became mainstream. So if anything, the terminal isn't some strange relic used only by hackers and Linux enthusiasts. It's the original way humans talk to computers. Now, I kinda get the fear from the terminal. It is a direct mean of communication between you and the operating system. It entirely bypasses all buttons and rudimentary guardrails placed by the desktop environment. But is that really the case? Does the terminal really bypass all safety measures? No. The answer is no. The terminal has a set amount of instructions that it can run, none of which can directly destroy your system, well, except for deleting and or modifying system files. But the operating system itself has guardrails and permission systems that make accidental system damage unlikely. People have always feared that by running the wrong command, something could seriously go wrong with their operating system. But here's the thing. If the command is wrong, the terminal will tell you that you misspelled the correct command, or that it's an invalid command. And in more modern terminals, it will even tell you that you wrote the command's name wrong, and it will suggest a command that exists. And it will even tell you if that command doesn't exist on your system, you can probably install it using this command. The terminal will always do what you instruct it, nothing else. So messing up the spelling of a command won't break your system. The terminal has evolved into a very user-friendly environment that one should embrace and try to learn. One could argue that it is a lot of memorization, but it isn't any more memorization than just speaking a language. It takes the most common way of instructing that we have, which is language, and allows you to instruct using it. And no, using the terminal is not coding. You don't have to know how to code to use the terminal, nor will you be writing codes in the first place. You'll be writing commands, which is entirely different. Although technically, you can write what we call bash scripts or batch scripts, as they're called on Windows, that allow you to automate execution of commands. It is similar to coding, but it's called scripting rather than coding. And trust me, it's a very different thing. So what is the takeaway from all this? Why am I trying to convince people to start embracing their black boxes? Well, as some of you might have guessed, I'm trying to get people to use Linux, or at least try Linux. I have noticed that the biggest fear people have with Linux is the fear of using the terminal. But as I said before, it is not scary. For many years, people online, who never used Linux, have always slandered Linux and claimed that you need to write 10,000 lines of code, as they put it, to install a simple browser. But that is not the case. It is one command to install almost any software available for Linux. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I'll go with how you do it on a Debian-based distro. But please note that the steps are really similar on any other kind of distro. To install, let's say for example, Firefox, a very beloved browser within the community, you simply execute sudo apt install Firefox. Okay, pause. What is all that gibberish you speak of, you may ask? What is a sudo? What is an apt? Well, my dear viewer, allow me to explain. Sudo is simply instructing the terminal to run the command as root, basically administrator but for Linux. And apt is the package manager on Debian-based distros. The command is very simple. We are first asking the terminal to execute our command in root, hence the sudo part. And then we ask it to run apt with the install parameter. And finally, we pass Firefox as our install candidate. You'll be prompted to enter your password, and then apt will run everything else for you. Quite simple, right? One could even argue that this is faster and more efficient than installing a browser on Windows. We have to open Microsoft Edge, EU, and then use Bing to look up Firefox, and finally press download and then install it after both Edge and Bing beg you to stay on Edge. Ironically, you don't even need to install Firefox on most Linux distros, because the default browser choice on most distros is Firefox. So it comes pre-installed. You can install whatever other browser you like by replacing Firefox in the earlier command with the browser you prefer. Do note that even Google Chrome is available, either through a downloadable package from Google's website, or more commonly through Chromium, its open source counterpart. Now, some short warning. I have explained to you what sudo does to run something as if the root user, basically the super user, has run it, so it will almost never say no. Assuming it can do what you instructed it, it will grant itself temporary privileges and run literally any command. Assuming the command is available and faces no errors, so be very careful when running something as root, especially if you are unsure of what the command does. It can destroy your system or render it at an unusable state, so be aware of what you run, especially if it is in sudo mode. The same way you have to be aware of what apps you run as administrator, be aware of what commands you run as root. Many people love to mess on online forums and just say, oh, just run sudo rm-rf/, and that basically attempts to delete the root folder of your installation, meaning it practically wiped the entire operating system and user data. Now, for a while, the rm command has added a required --no preserve root that must be passed if the root user was ever if the root folder, was ever instructed to be deleted. But that can easily be appended to the commands that are posted on online forums by trolls. So just be careful and never run commands that you aren't familiar with. So okay, cool. So the terminal does what I ask it to. It has been deemed to be faster and more efficient than some GUIs when it comes to installing software. What else? What does it offer? Well, the terminal can do everything you can do on GUI, but with more flexibility. Wanted to change something in a specific way? There's probably a terminal command for that. Wanted to delete all files across your system that include peanut in the file name? You can do that with the terminal. You just need to understand the way to use the command that you're dealing with. And that can easily be done using the man command on Linux. If you didn't get it, the man command, man stands for manual. You simply run man plus the command you're trying to learn. It opens up a document that you can read, which explains what the command does and how to use it and what other things it can do. It's a really powerful tool, and you should go around just checking the man pages of not every single, of the commands that you want to learn. It's very useful. Sometimes you discover things you did not know that command can do. Another thing that the terminal helps with is fixing errors. Traditionally, or more accurately on Windows, if you encounter an error, you would usually be given an error code and you would look it up and hope that the solution provided applies to your specific use case, or hope the program you're using has logging. On Linux, with the help of the terminal, you can run a program in verbose mode and see the program doing its thing live. It will spew the exact error code it's encountering, and you can apply the exact solution you need to it. Now, I'm going to go slightly off topic here and branch away from all the terminal speak to talk about another point that some people online have claimed in their Linux slander. And that is, Linux doesn't support XApp or OI game. Now, for the most part, most mainstream applications can be run on Linux, either natively or through Wine, which stands for Wine is not an emulator, because it is a translation layer, which is great. I've rarely had to use Wine for applications, honestly, but of course, it varies from person to person. Now, some programs are known to simply not work on Linux, like Microsoft Office, and for that I suggest using alternatives. I personally find LibreOffice a great alternative. In fact, I am writing the script using LibreOffice. It does what I need, but there are other alternatives out there like OnlyOffice, EuroOffice, so see what suits you best and adopt it into your workflow. As for games, according to ProtonDB, over 40% of the games on Steam have been reported to work great on Linux with little to no prior configuration. And it is true. For most games on Steam, you simply install it and press run. It will work, amazingly so too. I haven't encountered any issues with my games and they were all just click and play. You may encounter a game that is considered as borked by ProtonDB or even a game that is bronze tier. And those are so rare to come by, and sometimes those bronze tier games just work. Keep in mind that a lot of games with kernel level anti-cheat won't work. Not to imply that all of them don't work, some do. So if your game requires kernel level anti-cheat, check ProtonDB first. Linux is not perfect. No operating system is. Nothing is. But we can't ignore its existence and pretend like nothing is wrong with Windows. We all have seen how Microsoft has been messing Windows up, turning it into the bloated, ad-filled and sloppy operating system we know today. We cannot let this keep going on. We must embrace the free and open source software movement and regain control of our systems. We cannot live in the bubble of stereotypes that dates back to 1992. Ever since Linux came out, it has always supported GUIs, and more distros started coming pre-packaged with desktop environments since the early 2000s. So you could say that rumor is as old as the modern internet. The terminal simply exists because it wants to be useful, not because you are forced to use it. So don't be afraid of the black box. Open it, experiment with it, break a few things, learn a few things, and most importantly, have fun. Go install Linux. See you next time.